Now, of course, you would have seen the flooding around Taree in the Mid-North Coast of New South Wales this week, which sadly left 5 people dead and thousands stranded. But some people just couldn't wait to blame it on climate change. But who cares if there are people dead and people losing their homes? Because there are political points to be scored here. It is just pathetic. I mean, the floods had not even finished before this research mob called Climameter put out what they call a rapid attribution study overnight on Thursday, which said the floods, especially around Taree, were significantly worsened by human-driven climate change. Now, they did the same within days of Cyclone Alfred in March and Cyclone Zelia in Western Australia in February. And if you go on their website, have a look. Of the 80 weather events they've assessed so far, there are only 3 that they don't think were caused or exacerbated by climate change. So we seem to know where they're going here. Industry Minister Tim Ayres was asked about whether the flooding was caused by climate change on Sky News this morning.
We are likely to see intensifying climate-related events in terms of fires or floods, particularly in our coastal regions. That's what the science says. I think it's a mistake to attribute every single event, but we know there's going to be more of them and that they're going to be more intense.
You know, someone sneezes and they say it's climate change. Now, Will, why can't we just say we've got a disaster in front of us that we need to deal with? Now is not the time to be talking about whether it's climate change, whether it's this or whether it's that. Of course, some people will believe that is the case, but it's not going to do much for someone who's just had their house flooded and all their belongings taken away, or someone who's just lost their dad because they drowned in the flood, etc. Like, there's a time and a place.
Well, not when it's a religion. When it's a religion, you're a believer or you're a zealot 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that is the real problem with the climate debate. The thing which is so annoying about these sorts of moments is that we never have this holistic look at the problem. So we know that they mentioned cyclones. We know that cyclones in tropical Queensland are actually at historic lows. And I think they've said that there is arguments that climate change may be a result of that. In the UK, I've had arguments to say that climate change would be great because more people die from cold weather than they do from hot weather. And again, like logical common sense, but we never have that because we never have a rounded conversation. It is purely just point scoring. And this is another example of political point scoring on an ideological issue as opposed to looking at it very pragmatically.
Well, I'm reminded, Joe, of our mate Tim Flannery saying, so I think it was in 2007, he said, you know, that the rains will stop and the dams will no longer fill. Well, Warragamba Dam spilled yesterday. So, I mean, serious. And we need to believe it now. Yes, it's climate change.
Yeah, there's 2 things that are guaranteed to absolutely put everyone off your cause. The first thing is making ridiculously extreme predictions to grab headlines that then turn out not to be true. And people think, well, if that's not true, if what Tim Flannery said was clearly bollocks, then the whole thing must be bollocks. It must all be a scam. It must all be rubbish. And so that is what those sorts of predictions have resulted in, and you can hear it every single night and day. The other thing is to look like you're exploiting personal tragedy and hardship for your cause. Now, again, apart from actually saying this is because of climate change, what do these numpties think they're actually achieving? We've already got a federal government that is, you know, pissing off farmers by building giant wind farms as far as the eye can see. So, yes, it's climate change. No, it's not climate change. Who gives? Like, the point is there is already action being taken, and the question is, how do you get to net zero? How do you mitigate it? Whatever. The government is already doing that. So it is just pure virtue signalling. It's basically, you know, just jumping on the coattails of somebody else's grief just so you can say, look at me, look at me, look at me. Now, again, you know, so what? So what? Does that mean you support, you know, we need to do more action on climate change? All right, so what? How? When the government's doing all its wind farms? Do you want the nuclear? Maybe we should get that debate.
Can I just make the incredibly obvious point that needs to be made every time in this situation, that no matter how much the Australian government does do, it won't change the climate.
1.3% of the world's
But also it'll never be enough for the activists.
Yeah, exactly. And there was no one
emergency.
sitting there this week, Parnell, going, why did this flood happen? They were saying, what can we do to help people who are in the flood?
Yes, but of course, these organisations, that is their raison d'etre, is to get a message out there, and they will use any opportunity to do it. But as Joe says, you know, if you exaggerate things, you lose the match point. So it's a bad idea. It's terrible PR.
Yeah.
And to have that in the Sydney Morning Herald today also, I would note, that was actually a real own goal for them. because people reading that tend to be, you know, they tend to subscribe to the climate is changing. They tend to be worried about it, and they're reading that now, going, these guys are trying to turn everything that might not be climate change into climate change. So they're creating skeptics.
Yeah, and as I said before, Kel, I mean, you know, 3 of the 80 weather events they looked at are apparently so come on, mate, who believes it?
And what do they want us to do? I mean, Joe raised this point and he's quite right. But not only can Australia not do anything, if all the politicians in the world try to do something, nothing would happen. Politicians cannot control the climate. That is egotistical arrogance. Climate, it's just logic. Climate is the most complex mechanism on the planet. The word climate, people forget this, means the entire atmosphere of the entire planet, every molecule in action at every moment and affecting every other molecule. It's an uncontrollable, complex mess. We can't stop it. So what intelligent people would say is, let's stop trying to mitigate it. It can't be done. Let's see what we can do.
Bust out the beachwear.
I wish I had
Let's adapt. Let's work out what we can do. What can we do to cope with this better? What can we do to prepare for these things?
Kel,
That's sensible.
It might be what some people would call alternative facts.